One supporter told us, and this is not the only supporter to say this, I have run up a credit card debt over $20,000 supporting what I thought was right. And now when I see Act Blue, I shut it down because I can't be sure about where it's going.
Awful.
We have our donors in credit card debt for these 5X match, hair on fire, if you don't donate, we're screwed messages.
Atrocious.
Oh, yeah, it's beyond atrocious. It is hamstringing our ability to use the one channel we have to raise money to actually build a new media platform like a turning point on the left. Because we are at a turning point in this country, and we need our own infrastructure to be able to spread our own message. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to part 2 of our special episode of Concepts of a Pod covering the tragic assassination of Charlie Kirk and what we as Democrats can learn from the political moment that it has created. And it really has been quite a weekend of political news and hysteria, both on and offline, culminating today with a guest-hosted episode of The Charlie Kirk Show by J.D. Vance.
Yeah, and so we thought we'd have a guest host of our own, one of my really good friends, Zach. He is a political consultant that has worked all around the country. He worked in Biden HQ and Kamala HQ and just about every other state. And we're really excited to have him here to get his take on just everything that's been going on over the weekend. I thought that his voice would be a really good one to have for all this. So welcome, Zach. We're very excited to have you. I don't know if I missed anything in my intro that you wanted to add.
Oh, well, relevant to this. Thank you for having me. First of all, excited to be here. Longtime friend of the pod. Excited to be on the pod.
Thank you for joining us.
But like longtime listener, first time caller, at least for Talk Radio. But outside of all of what Shannon just said, I'm also for a few more months on the Young Dems America Executive Board. So I oversee all of our caucuses, and just thought that's very relevant to mention. In light of what TPUSA is, not quite our counterpart, right? The Young National Republican Federation, but another youth-focused movement. So
thank you so much for joining us, and we'll jump right in here talking about TPUSA and the way it's going to continue on in Charlie Kirk's absence, because it very much feels like MAGA is trying to turn him into this martyr figure, and that effort is being led, unfortunately, by his widow, Erica Kirk, who I won't say too much to criticize a grieving widow, but I was alarmed to see a tweet about a fundraising text that TPUSA sent out in her name, talking about the need to continue that movement and raising money off of Charlie Kirk's assassination in a way that really vilified the left and made it seem as if there was this fight that had to be continued. And I just wanted to get all of your thoughts about that and what it says about what's next in our politics.
I also want to remind everybody that we know very little about the assassin who shot Charlie Kirk. There's all of these conspiracy theories flying around from the right and the left, unfortunately. We know almost nothing about this guy other than a few things that the police have put out or things that we've discovered from his social media. But I just wanted to put that disclaimer in there to make sure that people know that we actually don't really know everything yet, and that we're going to discuss probably some of these conspiracy theories, but we are not endorsing or saying we believe in any of those conspiracy theories that are going around right now.
Yeah, it's shocking how little we know and how quickly people are willing to speculate and throw in their own opinions, and on the right look for any reason trans could be involved as a concept, not even a person, just a concept.
Everything that's gone around this whole situation is, I don't know, it's been absolutely nuts. And seeing everything unfold over the weekend with lots of, I'm going to call them ultra conservative elected officials posting things about how we shouldn't be condoning violence or we shouldn't be celebrating violence. And then people have been pulling up old tweets. My favorite one was, I believe it was a representative from West Virginia who was talking about how we shouldn't be condoning any violence or celebrating violence. But I think it was just last year. He posted a photo of his Christmas tree with Donald Trump sitting on top and a bunch of elected officials like Hakeem Jeffries, Bernie Sanders, and Nancy Pelosi with nooses right underneath Donald Trump on his Christmas tree. So yeah.
I didn't see that.
We'll find the picture and put it in here. But yeah, it's just things like that, or people saying, I've started posting more TikToks on our account, on my personal account, and people are saying that January 6th wasn't actually a big deal. And I've been like, so wanting to hang Mike Pence on the front lawn of the White House wasn't a big deal. That wasn't violent. So it's been very interesting seeing all of the discourse with all of that. I don't know if anyone has anything else to add with that. I know that was a lot of fuel to the fire just now that I added.
I do want to just jump off of what you said about the general rhetoric from the right about January 6th. I think there was a lull period in between the past 4 years where they kind of just stopped bringing it up as much. I mean, we saw the Biden administration doing really well at arresting those folks. But when I was canvassing in 2021, we were doing a recall election for an Arizona state legislator who helped incite the riot. He was tweeting, he was there. We were trying to get him recalled, so we were doing petitions. And I was outside of a grocery store in rural Arizona, and a woman we had an altercation. She spit in my face. And this is right before vaccines became public. This is March 2021. She spit in my face, and then she said, no one died. And then I brought up Ashley Babbitt, and then she got very mad. So that's also a very touchy subject for them that they will just forget unless it serves them, which is frustrating because there are so many examples of their own side doing some stuff that, incites violence or contributes to violence. I'm not saying that the left is completely against that. There have been some times where there are folks, but I think it's really important to focus on when we're talking about Republicans versus Democrats, we're talking about such generalizations that we really need to start specifying who we're talking about. So when I talk about what the Dems are doing, I'm talking about elected officials. Half the time I'm not even talking about the DNC itself. It's the actions that elected officials are taking. But that's just my additional perspective to the reactions to this tragic event versus what happened 4 years ago.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I think that specificity in talking about who we're talking about is even more important now that this has become violent and a massive federal investigation being run by a podcaster, Kash Patel, because I actually listened to all 2 hours of JD Vance's guest hosting of the Charlie Kirk show today, so you don't have to. And one thing that really stuck out to me was actually when he brought in Stephen Miller as a guest for a little bit, and they were talking about how they needed to, quote, go after the NGO network that foments, facilitates, and engages in violence. And they're talking about just generalizing the left. Stephen Miller actually said,
the last message that Charlie sent me was that we need to have an organized strategy to go after the left-wing organizations that are promoting violence in this country.
And they gave no specifics about what they were talking about, who they were talking about, and, combine that with all of the baseless investigations into Act Blue. Zach, are you hearing, I don't know, in Democratic circles that you're in, are people concerned that Democratic organizations are now going to be targeted and that constitutionally protected free speech and even free speech under Citizens United that we try to use to combat Republican big money is going to be targeted up in this sweep?
I have not heard anything at the moment. There's other concerns we have, but I think the way everything's structured, it's kind of hard to go after some of these orgs, right? Great, we just are all online. I used to help combat right-wing extremism. It's actually super hard to shut down, in general, these networks. Let's pretend the FBI tried. They literally eliminated the department that goes after political extremism. So even their tracking point is extremely weak. Even if they wanted to, they probably would struggle because they fired all the experts, which is why they just have a lot less insight into these movements. I might be being naive, but they can't just wave a wand and all of a sudden we just disappear. The orgs, can't even just raid an HQ anymore. Everything's decentralized, everyone's working remote, even from that aspect. So
Yeah.
It's not like the 50s, which is barge in and pretend the whole office is communist, right? Can't do the McCarthy is. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, it's interesting, and them dismantling those offices, too, is a really interesting part of this because, again, Kash Patel and Dan Bongino are running the FBI. They're online podcast types, and it's almost making you wonder, are they just going to target whoever their Twitter followers have a problem with, or are they going to actually do the investigation? And It's interesting the way they've been trying to find any leftist or trans affiliation with this shooter when, in reality, like with many unfortunately sick people who bring guns onto campuses and shoot people, we don't necessarily understand what motivates them or why. And I actually saw something really interesting on TikTok that was a pretty in-depth explainer of what we do know about this guy's limited internet presence, and it's a much more complicated picture than really anyone's trying to paint. So I'm just going to show this and let me know what you guys think.
The casing on the shot that ended Charlie Kirk's life was engraved with a 12-year-old furry bashing meme. Notice his bulge, ooh woo, what's that? Which tells us an important thing. This assassination was a shitpost. That is the lens to analyze it through. It was designed to be maximally disruptive and incomprehensible, cloaked in layer upon layer of irony so that nobody would know what he really meant unless they were our guy. This performs a kind of nihilism that plays really, really well on particular image boards and Discord servers where this guy spent most of his life. And I say most of his life because that furry meme is from 2013. He was 10 years old when it was first posted and became popular. Now, the question everybody's asking is, was this kid a groiper? And the question everybody's parents are asking is, what is a groiper? So groipers are the most extreme fringe of this kind of image board nihilistic culture that I'm talking about. They're led by Nick Fuentes, who is a content creator and a streamer, and they really are about transgressing any boundary that exists. They are like explicitly white nationalists, really bad, horrible people. The name Groiper originates from this variant of Pepe the Frog, which comes about in the late 2010s, and these guys adopt it as a kind of collective self-portrait. They make it their profile picture, they make it their moniker. There was the Groiper War of 2019, in which Nick Fuentes and his people trolled Charlie Kirk and Turning Point USA, showing up at these debate events and asking questions that would push Kirk to say things that were even more extreme than Kirk was already saying. So where Charlie Kirk took like one step toward these kind of white or Christian nationalist ideas, the Groipers took 2 steps. They demanded that he make the subtext text. One post people have been citing as proof of the Groiper hypothesis is this one from his mother's Facebook that shows him dressed up as a meme for Halloween. It seems like the meme is Gopnik Pepe, but again, like many Pepe or Groiper memes, the core of this is it's a lonely male figure in sort of an immiserated landscape looking sad. And that's part of the story I wish more people were talking about. What's driving our political violence isn't just polarization, where one side is getting more radical and kind of undermining democracy, nor is it algorithms, like some have said, that are like pickling the brains of young people. It is that feeling, which these Pepe memes represent, of you're always going to be alone, you're never going to have a future, and you're never going to have a voice.
That was incredibly interesting, actually. I hadn't seen that video, and I kind of knew what a groiper was because someone else explained it to me, but I didn't even know that like that group existed. I know that when you get into ultra right-wing politics, there's all these separate little groups that are arguing and fighting with each other. And it's, first of all, very scary that that's happening. And second of all, that's crazy that essentially these Nick Fuentes, Groiper people thought that Charlie Kirk was essentially too far to the left.
I think the most interesting thing to me is that this stuff was dating back to 2013 when this guy was 10 years old, before Trump even came on the scene. And honestly, the profile of me, the only pattern it fits is looks like any other school shooter.
This is probably going to make a lot of people very angry, but I'm going to say it anyways. There's a reason that we should make sure that your children are not on the internet when they're, a certain age. I remember I was mad that my parents were like, no, you can't have Snapchat and Instagram when I was in, like middle school and in elementary school. But now I'm very thankful that my parents kept me off of that, and that I didn't discover Reddit until I was much older. And, there are children who are getting way too into these things. And the thing is, though, it's not their fault. They don't understand what they're looking at. They see a funny picture. Like, I know that when I was in high school, I didn't know what Pepe the Frog meant. I thought it was a funny looking frog. And like
it was for a while.
It was for a while, but we would send that around to each other as like a a reaction meme or whatever, because that's what Pepe the Frog was. And even though we were not using it for what it was originally, meant for, the right wing still got their stuff into mainstream social media for kids like my age in high school and stuff. So it's very scary to see how young these children are getting indoctrinated with these ideas, and just how important it is that what your environment is, you're a product of your environment. That's something that I've always been very, very interested in that concept. It's what I originally wanted to study when I was going to school and in college, and all of my papers I can think of throughout my entire high school career were how you become a product of your environment politically. And so it just becomes even more important now that we need to be understanding those things, you know?
Oh, yeah.
This also kind of comes down to the fact that there's no more spaces online for children. And I'm sure like when we were growing up, we're all in the same kind of age range. There was Club Penguin, there was Webkins,
Oh, yeah.
there was like, I had a Groovy Girls account. Barbie had their own like
Build-A-Bear also had like one.
Build-A-Bear, the Pixie
oh,
Hall of
gosh.
Fairies. There were so many options. Like Barbie's website was my like love my life, and I had a
I
computer
loved the
probably from
Barbie
third
website.
grade. Exactly. And so it's very interesting, and this thought isn't very fleshed out, but I do probably see that not only are these kids not on spaces made for them, but there are no protections anymore like there was several years ago when it comes to just like the paywalls and the types of ads that you're getting and all of these different things. And it just sucks because I think people forget.
I know Roblox is like very popular with kids, but it's an open website with an open chat room for anybody to go in. And I know that there's been a lot of, every once in a while, I get mom TikTok, parenting TikTok stuff on my feed. I don't know why, but it happens sometimes. No one understands the TikTok algorithm, but they'll talk about how like their kids are on Roblox and they start learning these awful phrases or like these, you know, bad words that, you know, when you're 10 years old, you shouldn't be saying, you know, any swear words. And they start to learn things, you know, like using the word gay as a slur and a bad thing. And they learn it from the internet. And there's nothing there. There used to be a priority list of things that were important, and now it just keeps getting pushed down because no one is safe anywhere anymore, you know?
Oh, also, there's stats that coming out are showing the average 18-year-old spends as much time by themselves as like a 65-year-old does on
Whoa.
average hours per day. Then you can look at high schoolers, and I don't have the stat memorized, but essentially you could see post-pandemic a massive drop in times high schoolers were hanging out with friends on a weekly basis, and the hours or days has like dropped by like over 50%. So, and you know, you have a lot of
That's
people
not
having
good.
parasocial relationships with podcasters. But if online content creators, right, it's very easy social substitute, right? If I throw on a podcast right now, and it sounds like I'm listening to my friends talking.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, but also you're allowing, right, it gives you more time to get and go into the depths of the internet. And it kind of goes hand in hand. And the loner thing, you're by yourself, it just spirals down unless you get pulled out. You see that a lot, not even just with kids, but with extremism. Normally, it spirals on either the left or the right. You spiral down the conspiracy theories.
Yeah.
I want to point out the parasocial relationship thing for a second.
Yes.
That's something that as I started to become like a big Taylor Swift fan, I noticed there were a lot of people saying a lot of weird things about her on the internet. And maybe sometime, like I know Simone also loves Taylor Swift. We'll do a whole episode on that. But people create parasocial relationships because they're online so much. Yesterday, when Taylor Swift went to the Chiefs game, nobody saw her. No one got to see her outfit because she was behind this giant bulletproof partition because of everything that's happening in the world right now. And there's these people who have created such deep parasocial relationships with celebrities and podcasters and influencers that they can't go out and even just like be a normal celebrity and walk by paparazzi and say hello, and they get to photograph you, and everyone, you know, obsesses, oh, Taylor Swift's here, I love her outfit, whatever. They can't even do that anymore now. And it's absolutely crazy. And like I said, I could go very deep into what I understand about people's parasocial relationships with Taylor Swift, because people were getting mad and throwing temper tantrums at the Eras tour when they weren't getting the surprise song they wanted. And there's a whole sect of people who think that Taylor Swift is actually a lesbian, and they're upset that she's not a lesbian. And like they were talking about how they got physically sick when they saw that Travis Kelce proposed to Taylor Swift and she said yes. That's crazy. And that's just what I know about the fandom, you could say, that I'm a part of. I can't imagine how much deeper and grosser and just ickier it gets when you get into this political extremism with these parasocial relationships, people like Nick Fuentes and Charlie Kirk and Donald Trump, and the list goes on and on.
Oh, yeah, it's fascinating. I was in a Twitter conversation. I don't want to even call it a fight because it's actually a pretty respectful discourse with someone who was clearly a Charlie Kirk fan, talking about the kind of the difference in the scale of the response to Charlie Kirk's assassination versus Melissa Hortman and her husband and their golden retriever over the summer. And the person I was going back and forth with said something about how people didn't feel like they had a relationship with her. People didn't feel like they knew her, like they felt like they knew him. And that's why it was so much more sickening to these people who felt like they lost a friend. And just gave me pause, because it's like, I mean,
That's a really interesting point.
yeah.
My perspective as well is that there wasn't video footage that was released to the public uncensored of that murder.
Yes.
There's not, and the same goes for like any school shootings. Like you really have to like go looking for that awful graphic imagery. But this was just so out of control that I just think the emotion it brought, because of how horrific it is, and so many Americans haven't seen that up front. They just see like the blood smears afterwards. I think that
Like
definitely.
how many times have you actually seen someone be killed?
Actually,
Like,
that's
now
actually a
there's
really good
so
point.
many more people who have seen that, and it's like that's
It's also an in-person
insane.
event with
Yeah.
thousands of people versus, a nighttime assassination.
You know what I realized? There have actually been 2 times now that I have seen someone be killed on camera. One was Charlie Kirk. Can anyone guess the other?
JFK.
Oh, sorry, 3.
I also have
That's
seen
awful.
JFK.
I was like, oh,
I forgot about the Zapruder film. I mean, because it was so pixelated, but
Who's the other one?
George Floyd.
oh,
Yeah.
yep.
And
And they were very different.
yeah. And I also found what's really interesting that's been going around the internet lately are Charlie Kirk's comments on George Floyd, and people actually pointing out that people are now criticizing certain leftists who, by the way, are saying some deranged things online celebrating Charlie Kirk's death, but the words are eerily similar to Charlie Kirk's words. And I'll put them up on the screen because I don't remember them verbatim and I don't want to misquote here, but it's just a little shocking and leads to the question, how did this all get so politicized and divisive? And weirdly, I think it might all go back to those fundraising texts. And I mean, the fact that Erica Kirk sent one in response to this, that was her first statement asking for money. And that seems to be the instinct of so many political groups when anything happens, really begs the question of how much of that rhetoric in the messaging has actually contributed to ratcheting up the temperature to the point where people feel okay getting violent.
Well, I mean, to kind of pull everything we've just talked about together, there's a lot of mixed feelings going on right now about Erica Kirk's first verbal statement since her husband was assassinated. I want to make this very clear that I personally have a lot of mixed emotions about this, and a lot of other people do too, and you probably will as well. In her first verbal video statement since her husband was assassinated, she was talking about how she has to explain to her children that their father is never going to come home again and they're never going to see their father again. That is a deeply upsetting thing to have to do as a parent. I could never imagine doing that. I don't have children, but it makes me like feel awful inside even think about having to do that. And what she decided to tell everyone was, I had to tell my girls that daddy is on a work trip with Jesus so that he can afford your blueberry budget because you love blueberries so much. At first, when you hear that, at least I was like, oh, that's really cute. A simple way to explain to these little children what's going on. But then you start to think about it and you're like, okay, that doesn't actually tell their kids what's going on. Their kids are going to think that, I don't even know what their children are thinking. But then it goes into this parasocial relationship with Jesus and religion, which I don't think we have enough time to get into today. And I know that's a very, very touchy subject for a lot of people. I do think it'd be interesting for us to talk about that sometime, but that's, there's that parasocial relationship that she's trying to have her kids create with religion and with Jesus and with God. And then they just think that their dad is out figuring out how to pay for their blueberries.
By the way, just clicked for me. I don't know if it's that she's trying to create the parasocial relationship with Jesus or that she's trying to create it with him, with Charlie Kirk, because for the rest of these kids' lives, they're going to see their father's image as a martyr, as the conservative movement.
Not only that, they're young. The rest of their lives, there's to be a video of their father just getting killed.
Yeah.
Publicly
Yeah.
available. There's a Wikipedia page dedicated that's written already about their father's assassination. I mean, that I would not know how to raise kids on that. Like, what?
Yeah. It's
And they're like
insane.
4. I think the kids are like 4 or 3.
Yeah, I think
1 and 3.
1 and 3. They're very young, and like we said, if we're gonna boil it down to be very simple, this is a grieving mother with her very, very young children that don't understand what's going on, and they're not aware of all of this. And so, I know none of us are gonna obviously tell her how to parent her children and how to grieve, but it's just very interesting, like you said, to see how she's politicizing all of this for her husband, in honor of her husband. Her husband would have wanted this to be done. I don't know the best way to say this other than she's trying to figure out, I guess, just what to do right now and what the best thing she can do for her and her family is. We know that they're not going to be short of money ever. And so it's kind of gross to see the way that she's going about this. And gross may be the wrong word, but that's what I'm going to use. And if people can get upset at me if they want about that, they probably will. But that's how this feels.
I just want to know who's advising her to do this, because I guarantee you it is not all coming from her. I'm sure she didn't write that text message, and
of course not.
Whatever they're doing and whoever's coming up with these strategies, unfortunately, it clearly seems to be successful for them, given that they said in this podcast today that apparently there have been 37,000 new applications for Turning Point chapters since the assassination. And at the same time, it's very clear that they are using the levers of power to rapidly consolidate their ability to shut down any opposition to what they want to do. So it really begs the question that our supporters, too, are actually asking. This is a question directly from one of our supporters in our Democratic Donor Focus Group. How do we remain true to our values and fight back? Because obviously we can't glorify what's going on. We are not in favor of political violence. We would never even think to say that shooting someone and leaving kids without a father and a wife without a husband is how you go about this. But how do we do it? How do we stay on the cutting edge in this crazy media environment where we can't seem to get a hold?
I think there's a few things. I think one, if we want to win people back to our side, I think our response in general has been pretty bad. I have a friend who worked for Charlie Kirk. I have a Republican friend, shocker. She sat by them multiple times. He was in the tent, right? When I saw that, my first thought was, well, if that was her up there and the shooter missed, she'd be dead. Gun violence is bad. I have friends who worked for him, my friends who know him, and I think I'm in group chats and I was atrocious because I'm thinking, well, it's a Democrat. I worked for the Minnesota DFL. I worked for Melissa Horman. I'm so horrified and speechless about what happened in my former home state. But we all work in politics. You look at Gabby Giffords, right? Staffers died. So it's more than just a political figure. It's the other people around it, and seeing from other people who I work with, not being able to connect the dots on that of how do you not pause and think. These are the people who are supposed to be helping, they're not leading our movement, but are the back end people, all of the logistics and most of the work. How do you not pause? I mean, I was choking up just thinking about that. Personally, I did not see that from a lot of my friends. And I was also shocked. I'm like, just how do you not be selfish for a minute and think that be flipped very easily onto our side? And I think if we are not able to acknowledge, I mean, I know they missed the mark when Melissa was assassinated. I don't want to get to that level. I want to be able to be empathetic. That I don't want to be a Charlie Kirk and have no empathy. He said, I think sympathy over empathy. I think that's what you pull back, ignoring our donors, what actually most Americans, right, have weird political views that don't quite align left to right. They're not engaged in politics. Most of my friends in Chicago do not do politics. So my timeline on Instagram looks very different if I divide it between political in tune people on both the left and the right, and just my average friends who maybe are just veterinarians, office workers. Very different response, and you can kind of feel it and see it. And then you forget about its impact. And all of a sudden, how can we claim to have that mantle if we are losing our empathy? And I think then as a response, I think we missed the mark, but we have a lot of time to fix it. And I don't know if that's what donors want, but I know that if we want to actually win people back to our side, we got to maintain that. There was a poll that came out that said, would you defriend someone of the opposite party? Republicans and independents were very no, I won't. And Democrats have this massive gap on that. And when you look at the average person, right, who we need to win in swing states, right, the average voter actually has people on both sides of the aisle. And if we are going down that path of actually you need to end relationships, it makes us outliers. And will continue to stay in irrelevance.
There's another, you reminded me, Zach, of something that I haven't thought about in quite a long time, but I don't know how many other political staffers watch our podcast, but I think just about every political staffer who's worked on a campaign in an office has experienced some form of political violence. I know I have multiple times. And it's like, while you were just talking about that, I started to think about some of those things that I've gone through and how scary that was. I've had guns pulled on me. One of the offices I worked in, there was a bomb threat against us from our own security guard that we trusted every day. I've had to be evacuated from buildings before. It's very, very scary when you experience those things. And as a staffer, some of that empathy sometimes gets lost because it becomes normalized that you have to be prepared to deal with that, or you have to deal with that. And I know that that's something that I've been thinking a lot about the last week, is that, I have empathy that someone died due to gun violence, but do I have empathy for the fact that it was Charlie Kirk who was spreading all of that violence, and some of his people who incited that violence against, me and against every other political staff who's been out there? It's just something very interesting to think about. And this was only like a half-baked thought, but food for thought, something for I guess people to think about, that's the unfortunate reality of working in politics, is that you're going to have to deal with violence, and that should not be the norm, and that should not be the reality. Those are things I don't talk with, a lot of people about, because it's traumatizing to go knock on someone's door and have them pull a gun and say, if you ever come back, I'm going to shoot you, or to have to be evacuated from your office because they think that there could be an active bomb in there, and that the security guard that you saw every day, who knows your name and knows where you live and knows what time you come in and what car you drive, was the one who set that up. Very, very scary stuff to think about, and just to think about how normalized it is that there's, at least two people on here, probably all of us, if you think about it, have experienced something like that, and that should not be normal. That should not be normal.
Yeah.
It's really sickening in the way that they're essentially taking this horrible situation, and there are plenty of Republicans who are like national leaders who have been caught previously bashing on Charlie for either not being Republican enough or whatever it was, and they are using this as their token white guy to spearhead all of the different ways that they're just going to add their cheat codes into the game of politics itself. I don't know, Jordan, what you were going to say.
Something very similar, actually, about all of this just being another piece in a game and the way we have gamified politics. And weirdly, I think, Shayna, too, with your complex emotional wrestling, I think speaks to just the tragic irony of this entire situation, because it was obviously tragic that this happened, but also sickeningly ironic that a man sitting under a banner that says, "Prove me wrong," is shot when talking about mass shootings very flippantly. And like that video we showed earlier said, this shooting was a shitpost, and it's like almost like the guy who was playing Grand Theft Auto or something. And
like he thought this was a joke, and it's not a joke.
No.
None of this is a joke, and we're becoming so desensitized to it that people are starting to think it's a joke and okay to do that. And I know we talked about this during the last episode too, but we're getting into very, very dangerous territory right now, where, like you said, it's poetic that this guy who said to keep the Second Amendment, there's going to have to be some shootings and some gun deaths. And he was asked about mass shootings, and then he was shot and killed by someone who was able to probably very easily buy a gun on a campus where you can open carry. We're in very, very, very dangerous territory now. And the right and the left are not helping right now.
Yeah.
What I'm curious about is, so Father Coughlin was probably people don't know who he is. So in the 30s, 20s, he was just a Catholic pastor out of Detroit. And long story short, he needed a fundraise for his, build a new priest parish, whatever, and like build a new parish, build a new building there. And he went on radio, and, this is 1930s. And he got really, became a national radio appointment listing. About a third of the country listened. And he was a rapid anti-Semite, an isolationist, all that stuff. And there was a question like, how long will he go? I mean, most people don't know the name for a reason, right? We can think of other figures from that time. Well, it turns out the bombing of Pearl Harbor happened, and then all of a sudden, other stuff happened, and all of a sudden, beyond just his anti-Semitic approach, his pure isolationism, that whole movement died, and he was still inciting stuff, and essentially it was, we'll not arrest you. The FBI was like, we won't arrest you, seize everything, if you just shut the fuck up and disappear. And I mentioned that because I think Charlie Kirk was, right, a lieutenant to Donald Trump, right? If my mind was, you still have in the background of all of this and why I think we see a rapid or fundraising office. There's still this ticking clock on what happens once Trump is no longer president. Does the movement continue, or is this a Father Coughlin thing? And I legitimately viewed Charlie Kirk before this and still now probably in the lane of a Father Coughlin type thing, right? His prominence came up because he was very good at using media and figuring out how to create good content. He was a fantastic content creator. If you look at the mechanics of how it's spread, I think the content was atrocious, no shit. But I think, can someone reproduce that on our side? Can we hit that level? On theirs, I mean, they invested in it. I'm aware of their funding mechanisms. We need in the match for that. But will we have that moment for us of eventually this movement will lose its steam? Will we be able to help end it because we're able to have that shift in public persona? Will there be an event where we have a massive public event that skewers this thing that makes them immediately out of step and no longer to rabble rouse? Or will it continue on? And I just don't know. But I think that's what's happening right now is people are scrambling to secure that next step because he was in that lane. Now the lane's open.
Yeah, I think the more interesting question, though, I mean, it's fascinating to talk about what could happen on the right and who knows what's going to happen on the right. But I think a bigger question is what about the Democratic Party? What about our side? Because to answer your question, Zach, it's not a matter of if, but when or who is the one to create something to harness all of the static energy that so clearly exists on the left. And the question is, will it be a constructive force or will it be a destructive force? And in the case of Charlie Kirk, was that for the right? You're correct. I think, I mean, we are the Democratic Party now probably where the Republicans were in 2015, 10 years ago when like Jeb Bush was the presumptive nominee and
Sorry.
No.
I had to say it.
But seriously, we have no idea where the future of our party is going to come from. I mean, our focus group says that only 36% of the people who are most committed to donating to Democrats, the people who click on these texts and continue to do so, actually trust all of our Democratic leaders. Another 36% say they trust some but not others, but it really speaks to a lack of confidence in, say, Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries.
Something that I think is that we've talked about before, but will hopefully be a little more recognized by the Democratic Party and the DNC is that the right-wing influencers are so much better than the Democratic influencers. And I think I can give a decent reason why. It's because what they say isn't scripted and they just say stuff. The person on the Democratic side who's very popular, who does that, who they always try to silence, AOC. AOC is very, very popular with people because she says what everyone else is thinking and she says what's right and what is just. And a lot of the other Democratic leaders don't do that. They need everything to be scripted. They're not willing to just go out and say what's right and say like, this is screwed up. This shouldn't be happening. And also having emotion when you talk. That is something that when you see these videos of Charlie Kirk, Ben Shapiro, Joe Rogan, they are very, very good at that. And I think that there's not like some sort of equation or like chemistry that you can do to figure out how to pop, someone out on the left like that. People just need to say what's on their minds and to speak the truth and say when something is bad, that this is bad. Call a spade a spade. If it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, then it's a duck. I think we've really lost a lot of that in the last few years, trying to so carefully make sure that we can reelect this person or reelect that person. And we're not paying attention to the younger people who are out here trying to run for office and trying to speak up. They're just trying to keep pushing the narratives from these old incumbents who maybe have overstayed their welcome in their, respective legislatures.
I just need to interject real quick. This is a great discussion. I wish I could stay for more of it. I do have to hop, but I'm really looking forward to hearing the rest of it. Thank you, guys.
One thing I love to talk a lot about is what does our talent pipeline look like and who is making these decisions and who's rising through. If I took a Charlie Kirk and made it a Democrat, he would not get a penny just because the background, the height at college, went to Harper College. It's a community college up in DuPage, I think, or like Northwest Lake County. So kind of can't remember where it is, but on the verbs, Northwest of we would not give him months, right? You can 2018, you can look at the entry level staff on Republicans and Democrats. Republicans came from like Wisconsin, Ohio State, and I think Michigan State. Big state schools. In 22, a little more of a southern thing, but large state schools in the South. Uh, you have big colleges, you're having a broad experience. Democrat operatives at entry level are coming either it's like all the Ivies, right? Your Harvard, your Yale's, either the DC, your GW, Americans, whatever, Georgetown. A private school here, they're the only school that normally, and I don't have the staff to do multiple surveys on it, but in general, if there's like one public school that makes it, it's like UC Berkeley, which I would not say is a representative public school. So if you're coming in from these echo chambers, right? I went to large state school, University of Minnesota, with like probably 50,000 students on campus. You have a wide range in your day-to-day life. I did not do politics in college. I was not a poli sci major. I know the diversity of my friend group. People are shocked to find out they're like, I was good friends with the farm sorority. Shout out them. Most like I have friends who are farmers. I have friends who are Republican. My only political friend in college who went to politics is actually Republican. I'm the anomaly in my friend group. Most of them are now doctors, lawyers, and other stuff. I'm in politics. And that exposure of different avenues, right? I don't think that the people necessarily who make these funding decisions in the future for the party have a fully grasp on the average American, right? And I think because of that, until we get rid of that dichotomy of who we're funding, what that people look like, we're not going to be able to reach that when we acknowledge like what the top 10 most watched live TV events. And there in America, it's football games of some type. I think 11 is the Oscars and 12 last year in 24. Number 12 was the Trump-Harris debate, or 11. But the top 10 were football games.
Yeah.
And that's a huge cultural thing. I think, and this is as an example that when we have our gaps with male voters in particular, who's leading that conversation maybe are not the I'm not saying they have the wrong background. I'm saying are they able to relate and connect and be able to identify a Charlie Kirk type, right? Charlie Kirk got that feed funding that we just don't see in youth spaces. He had good skills, right? It'd be to say he developed something that we are not going to reproduce on the left. We'll not be able to because we don't put the resources, but we don't have the right staff in my mind because of our pipeline issues to even replicate this. Can we get someone out to like Black Hills State University, which is southwest South Dakota? Doubt it. But there could build something out there. There are Democrats everywhere on campuses. We just, example, fail, or in young professional spaces. I just don't think we have that connection.
This is something that I know that me and Jordan Simone have been talking about since November of 2024 and leading more into figuring out why Kamala lost. And it always comes back to the fact that we are losing touch with what the average American is and what the average American does, what the average American earns and spends. Like you said, football, when you started to talk about that, I knew you were going to go there with football. Those are some of the most highly watched things on TV because people don't care about politics, or it's not necessarily that they don't care about it. They don't have enough capacity to care about it with everything else going on, like making sure they have enough money to pay for their mortgage, to put food on the table, making sure their kids get to dance class and soccer practice. And they don't care about politics because a lot of it doesn't impact them in big enough ways that they would notice. But when you have someone like Charlie Kirk going to college campuses with young, impressionable people who maybe this is their first time living away from their parents or in their new state, a perfect place for you to go talk to people and say, hey, what's your opinion on this? Try and change my mind. Feed me stuff. I know we could go way, way, way deep into this, but I feel like that's a decent place to I guess cut off the conversation because we could go on about this forever.
Yeah, no, because as much as the talent pipeline is half of the issue, I think another bigger part of it is the leadership at the top of the Democratic Party not being willing to listen to those diverse perspectives and to those differing backgrounds. And also, it feels like, and tell me if you feel this too, that when someone who's not part of traditional leadership starts to get any kind of traction, it's as if all whoever it is, the consultant class, come together to figure out how they can kind of put them in their place or make sure they stay in line. I think a good example is the reaction to Zohran Mamdani. I don't know if you saw Chris Van Hollen, who is one of the only Democrats to have done anything useful at all this year, was calling out Hakeem Jeffries for not endorsing him, but for not being willing to take a position one way or the other, called him spineless. And somebody from Jeffries' office on the record put his own name to the quote, people in New York are asking Chris Van who? The Democratic Minority Leader's office.
And that is one of the big problems with the Democratic Party is that people don't respect each other. At least up high in those circles. Yeah, that's my comment on that.
Yeah. People don't respect anyone who is kind of below them in the hierarchy of power. And I hate to say, with a lot of Democratic consultants, that extends all the way down to our donors who are fueling these movements, because we keep asking, where's all the Democratic money for all of this? I mean, donors like you, our audience, are donating $5, $10, $20 all the time, and all of that money is just going to line consultants' pockets, and the supporters don't even necessarily know what it's going to. For example, one supporter told us, and this is one of the craziest things I've ever heard, and this is not the only supporter to say this, so this is a trend, not an outlier. I have run up a credit card debt over $20,000 supporting what I thought was right, and now when I see a candidate I want to support and see Act Blue, I shut it down because I can't be sure about where it's going.
Awful.
We have our donors in credit card debt for these stupid 5X match, hair on fire, if you don't donate, we're screwed messages, and it's just, I don't even know.
It's bullshit. It's all fake.
You can
it's all
legit,
fake.
if you strip the partisan lean out of the text, you would not be able to tell them apart from Republican text. Literally,
No.
I've seen on both sides. That's what scares the shit out of me.
Yeah.
It's like, it took Act Blue forever to even acknowledge and address it through all the scam bans and all the firms that are benefiting off these scam packs. It's atrocious, and we, claim to be better, but we use the same tactics, and it's awful.
Oh, yeah, it's beyond atrocious. It is hamstringing our ability to use the one channel we have to raise money to actually build a new media platform like a turning point on the left. Because we are at a turning point in this country, and we need our own infrastructure to be able to spread our own message, both within our own network of creators, but also on non-political podcasts and new media spaces. Instead of propping up these consultants who just want to get richer and richer, we need people who are willing to go into those spaces and confront these issues on a new plane. And that's not going to look the same for everyone. We just need a diverse group of creators on our side.
Yeah. And we're trying to start to build that infrastructure and build a better community. And it all starts with all of you who are watching and donating to us. We can't do any of this without you. Jordan and I had a dream to try and help people better understand everything that was going on and make sure that people understood where their time and their money was going. And because of all of you and all of our donors and supporters and subscribers, we're able to do that. So we're very thankful that you are helping us help other people understand all of this.
Yeah, and Zach, thank you so much for joining us today to discuss all of these issues and talk about what Democrats can do to make sense of it all.
Thank you. The greatest words in the English language are come onto the pod to discuss. So glad to be here, glad to sharing my views and being part of this, and love seeing everything y'all have been doing, and can't wait to see what else you continue to do in the future.
Thank you. Yeah, we need more people going on all the pods because we need our voices out there. And thank you all to our supporters for believing in this vision and helping us grow. I know there are a lot of Democrats asking you for money, and we really appreciate that you're investing in this project to make this ecosystem a little better. I know we're going to ask for more money because it costs just so much to even keep the lights on for these organizations, and we are up against so many powerful forces here. So we won't lie to you. We won't say there's a fake match. We won't tell you the world's going to burn down if you don't donate, but we will tell you honestly, we really need your help because we are 100% powered by grassroots donors like you, and we could not do this without you. So if you like what you see, chip in, help us out, keep it going, and let us know what you think, and we'll see you next time.